how many rivers we had to cross before we found our way. Consider again that pale blue dot we've been talking about. Imagine that you take a good long look at it. Imagine you're staring at the dot for any length of time. And then try to convince yourself that God created the whole universe for one of the 10 million or so species of life that inhabit that speck of dust. Now take it a step further. Imagine that everything was made just for a single shade of that species, or gender, or ethnic or religious subdivision. We can recognize here a shortcoming, in some circumstances serious, in our ability to understand the world. Characteristically, we seem compelled to project our own nature onto nature. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work, worthy of the interposition of a deity. Darwin wrote telegraphically in his notebook, "More humble, and I think truer, to consider him created from animals." Close quote. We're Johnny-come-latelys. We live in the cosmic boondocks. We emerged from microbes and muck. Apes are our cousins. Our thoughts and feelings are not fully under our own control. And on top of all this, we're making a mess of our planet and becoming a danger to ourselves. The trapdoor beneath our feet swings open. We find ourselves in bottomless freefall. If it takes a little myth and ritual to get us through a night that seems endless, who among us cannot sympathize and understand? We long to be here for a purpose, even though, despite much self-deception, none is evident. The significance of our lives and our fragile planet is then determined only by our own wisdom and courage. We are the custodians of life's meaning. We long for a parent to care for us, to forgive us our errors, to save us from our childish mistakes. But knowledge is preferable to ignorance. Better by far to embrace the hard truth than a reassuring fable. Modern science has been a voyage into the unknown, with a lesson in humility waiting at every stop. Our common sense intuitions can be mistaken. Our preferences don't count. We do not live in a privileged reference frame. If we crave some cosmic purpose, then let us find ourselves a worthy goal. Or even your species might be owed to a restless few, drawn by a craving they can hardly articulate or understand, to undiscovered lands and new worlds. Each victory is only a prelude to another, and no boundaries can be set to rational hope. Our particular causality scheme has brought us to a modest and rudimentary, although in many respects heroic, series of explorations. But it is far inferior to what might have been, and what may one day be. Could the Milky Way be rippling with life and intelligence, worlds calling out worlds, while we on Earth are alive at the critical moment when we first decide to listen? Our species has discovered a way to communicate through the dark, to transcend immense distances. No means of communication is faster or cheaper or reaches out farther. It's called radio. We are now on an unprecedented scale, listening for radio signals from possible other civilizations.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Expansive run in the 60s and the 70s. You might have thought, as I did then, that our species would be on Mars before the century was over. But instead, we've pulled inward. Robots aside, we've backed off from the planets and the stars. I keep asking myself, is it a failure of nerve or a sign of nature? Maybe it's the most we could reasonably have expected. In a way, it's amazing that it was possible at all. We sent 12 humans on week-long excursions to the moon, missions that returned a wealth of data, but nothing of short-term, everyday, bread on the table, practical value. Carry it for centuries. Yuri Romanenko, on returning to Earth after what was then the longest spaceflight in history, said, quote, "The cosmos is a magnet. Once you've been there, all you can think of is how to get back." It might be a familiar progression, transpiring on many worlds.